Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Alton Dillard, communications consultant to One Chance to Grow Up. Wanted to give you guys a welcome and just to tell you a little bit of the why we're here. We are working on closing the intoxicating hemp loophole in the 2018 Farm Bill, which is a big win because we were able to get it closed. But we're really going to talk about why that was important and the importance of preserving that win. So, One Chance to Grow Up is a nonprofit that formed when Colorado was the first state to legalize recreational marijuana. And since then, you have seen more and more and more ways that THC products, hemp products, etc., have been floating around. So one of the things we'll be discussing today is the differences and the nuances there. One thing to know about One Chance to Grow Up, we do not take sides on the legalization issue, adult use, or anything like that. This nonprofit was formed solely for the protection of kids and their developing brains. And one of the things that we keep a big eye on not only are the demonstrated harms, but the potential harms to children. And that's why we're working so hard to get out in front of this issue. So we really appreciate everyone joining us today. Couple of quick housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand on the One Chance YouTube channel. And then we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the remarks. So attendees, you can submit questions using the Q&A function within the chat. If you wish to specify a question to a particular speaker, please state that. So again, by way of introduction, I'm Alton Dillard, communications consultant to One Chance to Grow Up. Then we also have Diane Carlson, who is a co-founder and national policy director for One Chance to Grow Up. We're also joined by Morgan Orem from the office of United States Senator Mitch McConnell, who is a big champion in working in D.C. to make sure that that loophole got closed. We have Dr. Libby Stout, who's a board certified psychiatrist and a foremost expert on THC and its effects. And then we're also joined by Rita Warstall, who is an affected parent who is going to share her somewhat heart-wrenching story. So we're really looking forward to being able to share our information with you today. So I'm going to kick it over to Diane Carlson, our National Policy Director, and she will take it from here.
Great. Thank you so much, Alton, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And I just want to start with the big picture. This closing of the hemp loophole was one of the most important youth safety, public health successes in decades, and yet it remains at risk. And we are tremendously grateful to have Morgan Orem, who was really a chief advisor and strategist to Senator McConnell, and the leadership of Senator McConnell and their whole team to ensure that this happened and to secure congressional support. And that included a rare supermajority of 76 senators, which is huge. So basically, huge consensus that kids should not be exposed to intoxicating products and they should not be labeled as hemp and CBD. So we've asked Morgan, the pro, to get on to tell us a little bit about what happened, what's happening now, and how we all can be most helpful. Thank you again, Morgan, for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Diane. Appreciate y'all inviting me on. I'm just going to give a quick overview of kind of what we did in the November bill, and then happy to take a couple questions when I am done. So the provision we were able to secure in the November funding bill essentially closed the hemp loophole. For those of you who don't know, in 2018 through the Farm Bill, Senator McConnell secured a provision that legalized hemp as an agricultural commodity. That unfortunately opened up this loophole that has allowed for the sale of unregulated THC products across the market. They can be sold in gas stations, they've been seen in grocery stores, and there's no limits to how much THC is being included in these products. They're being marketed to children in many candy and snack look-alike packaging. Often we see, Skittles, Sour Patch Kids, even Oreo cookies. And so this has been a problem that we have seen over the last 7, 8 years or so. And this was never the intention of the senator when he fought to legalize hemp. So we took this on and we were able to secure a provision that really locks down on these products. Essentially, it sets a limit of 0.4 milligrams per package or container, which is very, very small, very trace amounts of THC. This still allows for industrial hemp to be grown and industrial hemp products to exist on the market. It still allows for even CBD products with trace amounts of THC to exist. But it really cuts down on those intoxicating, gummies, beverages, smokable products, and any other thing that was on the market. It also explicitly prohibits synthetic cannabinoids such as Delta 8 and Delta 10, which was a large majority of this problem. And it still allows for FDA approved drugs that contain THC, hemp-derived THC. It still allows for research, at higher education institutions. So we were really excited and proud to get this included in the bill in November. This was an effort that we saw many health and safety organizations, such as One Chance to Grow Up, coming to us about, but also, industrial hemp farmers, also the Consumer Brands Association was very supportive, and as well as 39 different state attorney generals were very concerned about this. And so, moving forward, there was a 1-year delay in implementation in the language. So this will officially be enacted in law in November of 2026. We would have loved to see a little bit of a shorter implementation there, but that is just kind of how politics work sometimes. And so that should be implemented this November. We really appreciate y'all's support. Totally understand how this is a, public health and safety issue, especially to children. We heard lots of stories from school superintendents about kids in high schools and middle schools getting a hold of these projects. So just very much appreciate your support. We were really glad we could secure this provision. And I think going forward, we just would appreciate that continued support. There are some efforts to either further delay the implementation or enact some sort of regulatory structure for some of these products. Certainly still having those conversations, certainly still entertaining some different ideas. But I think in terms of what Senator McConnell wanted to accomplish, we did that in the November bill. So happy to take any questions. But yeah, just thank you again for having me.
All right. Thank you, Morgan. And Diane, why don't you take a little bit deeper dive into why this fight is so important and why we're not out of the woods yet, especially with the pushback that Morgan mentioned from industry.
Yeah, or maybe we could, while we still have Morgan, ask you, Morgan, what you are seeing as the biggest threat. I mean, we know there's legislation to delay. And if there were anything more specifically, we have a lot of people on this call that have worked very hard. We've worked very collectively to kind of educate and inform, communities, because there was so much confusion. People didn't even know where this was coming from. But if you had to put your finger on highest priority, we have a petition that we're going to be circulating so that we can use that to show members, how strong this commitment is. But the consensus was huge. And a big shout out to you and Senator McConnell. The language was excellent. I mean, you covered all the bases. And as you know, the intoxicating hemp industry is out there misrepresenting what this does and what it doesn't do. And that's what we're most concerned, is that people and the public, they understand, and even lawmakers in different states, what this does and doesn't do. So if there was anything, if you were to just highlight what you think is the riskiest risk we have this year, and just any other priorities, that would be great. We keep getting those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, this issue gets really complex really quickly. And it's so easy to misunderstand, especially, the specifics in the language, like what it does and what it doesn't do. And, media and fast information availability really feeds into that. Unfortunately, you touched a little bit on the intoxicating groups and companies narrative. Yes, there's been a lot of misinformation about what this information does or what it doesn't do. And so I think with that, the further delay in implementation is probably the biggest threat at this moment. There is lots of support from both Senate and House members for that legislation. And I think the reality of when you delay something and you continue to delay it, you're just kicking the can further and further down the road, and these important policy changes never happen. And so I think that as much as you all can help, communicate how effective this language will be, especially when it comes to children's safety, and how effective it will be keeping these products out of, the hands of children, and just like eliminating some of that access, I think is probably the most important thing, and the best thing that you all can do, sharing your stories, reaching out to your representatives and senators, and sharing that message, because unfortunately there is a lot of the intoxicating, product message being overheard over some of this health and safety perspectives. Does that make sense?
Totally. And another thing that we're seeing, and I know you're seeing it too, the industry is also trying to do these carve outs with like these THC beverage bills, which are really concerning because that's like in restaurants, everyday places. It also risks, rules about, just multiple substance impairment. And those are deeply concerning. And so I know we've got a lot of people on this call working in their states to encourage their lawmakers. I mean, a lot of states are adopting and aligning the language with federal, which is huge. And this is why this is so profound, which is great. And, trying to prevent that kind of activity in our states as well, because there's a lot of misunderstanding. Again, people are messaging this as low dose. These drinks are not low dose. They are intoxicating, high amounts of THC. So any other, I mean, I know the federal, if we can just keep this intact, it's going to give states and local jurisdictions really the authority they've been looking for. I mean, they want to protect their residents, and it's been really, really hard on this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we've been pleasantly surprised to see a lot of states and local governments mirroring what we did. I think Ohio was one of the bigger ones more recently. They mirrored our language almost exactly. And so we're very pleasantly surprised to see that. But yes, definitely keeping the focus, at least from our office, at the federal level, trying to make sure that stays intact. And I think there's a good chance it will. I don't really anticipate it going away, but definitely will be a uphill battle for the next, 10 months or so. So.
And Morgan, just one more thing, another brilliant thing. This is the first legislation that actually directs FDA with HHS to identify the cannabinoids and what cannabinoids mimic THC, and to actually, cap the total THC, which is huge, as this is really one of the biggest safeguards. I mean, we've been advocating for since the very beginning that is one of the most important ways to safeguard kids, consumers, and the public. So any other updates on that? I know that's supposed to come out like mid-February, but that too was huge. That's the first time in any marijuana policy where there's going to actually be this kind of process done.
We've worked very closely with FDA on all of this language. They have been a huge help, especially when it comes to some of the technical side of things. And so last I checked in with them a week or so ago, that they are still planning on rolling that information out here shortly. And I don't anticipate any delays there, but obviously continuing to have those conversations with them and work with them on this issue.
This is great. And Morgan, I don't know if you have time, but would you want to hear from Libby and Rita on why this is so important that we don't delay it and what the youth impacts more. I'm sure you've heard this a million times, what the youth impacts are, but and then Rita's story where, the CBD label, I mean, she trusted it
Mhm.
and it led to the ultimate cost to her family. I don't know if you'd have time to stay on for that. And then I know we're going to kick into action about what we can all do in an advocacy way, but would you still have time to stay on and listen to what they're going to share?
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to stick around for a few more minutes.
Oh, that would be great. So why don't we, Libby, if it's okay with you, Libby is a top medical expert on THC and the impacts to youth. And why don't you take it away, Libby? Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, I'm happy to be here. Uh, Definitely, there has been so much confusion about this whole situation. And we have learned a great deal from the whole cannabis episode. And One Chance has been on top of that from the very beginning. And what we do know is there is no safe use of THC at all in the developing brain. So the youth shouldn't be accessing this at all or shouldn't be able to uh, because of the problems of how it affects the developing brain. And I think that the industry has, especially the hemp industry, has known from the beginning that they could do this because there's been research on Delta 8 back since the 1940s. So we've known about Delta 8. And what kind of happened is the hemp bill allowed less than 0.3% by dry weight in the plant, but nobody is smoking that plant. What they are doing they're isolating that. So they're taking the plant and putting it in solvents like butane, propane, CO2, ethanol, and then they're dissolving out the different cannabinoids. And the big one they're looking for is CBD, of course. There is a very small amount of Delta 8 and Delta 9 in both the hemp plant and in the cannabis plant, the natural one. But then you can make it more strong by doing things to it. So you can take the CBD that you've isolated and you can add some catalyst, which like an acid, and you can heat it and it turns into THC. And THC is THC, whether it's Delta 8, Delta 9, Delta 10, THC acetate. All of these are problematic for people that are using them in the fact of the developing brain. And so we're seeing more and more of this happening. There are now case reports. I've identified several that are in the literature looking specifically at Delta 8. And of course, they're the young children, like one of the case reports is two young children, children 2 and 4, who got a hold of, the nerd-like ropes. I mean, they're made to look just like candy that kids are normally getting access to. And so both of those kids ended up on a ventilator because, when a young kid gets these products, whether it's intentional or accidental, the biggest problem in the young kids is they become very obtunded and you can't wake them up, and that's very scary for a parent. And they may become apneic, like they can't breathe or they're not breathing well, their heart rate is different, and so oftentimes they end up in the ICU. And then there's another case report of 3 young people, and these are more in the early 20s or 30s, using Delta 8 products and becoming violent and psychotic. And we have seen that for a long time now with cannabis, with the regular Delta 9 products. But we are also now seeing that with the Delta 8 products. And this absolutely needs to be stopped. We need regulation for this so that it stays at this idea of nothing can be more than 0.4 milligrams. That would be awesome because you could still have access to the products, but they're not the intoxicating hemp products. Because I have nothing against hemp. I have beautiful clothing made out of hemp, and it's a really great thing for textiles. And I even see health benefits from people eating the hemp seeds from the original hemp plant because they're very high in omega-3s. But it's these intoxicating hemp products that are really problematic and something that we need to really pay attention to. I can stop there, I can answer questions, or I can keep going.
Why don't you proceed for another couple of minutes? You make a really good point because one of the things that we're seeing industry doing is sort of mischaracterizing the legislation as a quote hemp ban. And that's why we're trying to really make that hard delineation between hemp and intoxicating hemp. So why don't you take another couple of minutes, Doc?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with the hemp plant. In fact, it's a phenomenal plant. One of the really phenomenal things that it can do is it can save the soil. Like if there's a lot of toxins in the soil, like heavy metals, it will suck those out of the soil. But then the problem is those heavy metals are in the plant. And if that's not ameliorated, taken care of, then people are getting the heavy metals in the products. And so one of the problems right now with all these Delta 8 intoxicating products is there is no real regulation. So nobody is actually going through the process of making sure that there's no pesticides, there's no heavy metals, there's no contaminants of any kind, because there can also be fungicides and herbicides. And so all of these things are in there. And there have been many studies now showing where they go to the consumer place, so they purchase in the gas station products, and then they send them to a lab and really look at what's available, what is in the product. And they're finding that the THC is much higher than it says it is because it says it's from hemp. But there actually is quite a bit of THC. And that is a problem, but they're also finding these contaminants in the product. One of the other real concerning things to me is the fact that all of this is online. If you are on any kind of social media right now, like Facebook, it's flooded with ads right now from all these companies because they're freaking out. They are really worried about this upcoming bill, and so they're trying to sell their product. And so they've got all this stuff online, and all you have to do is click on the thing that says you guarantee you're 21 years of age or older, and anybody can get on there. And then kids can order these things online. That's crazy. And that is something that absolutely needs to be looked at and taken into consideration because the access is huge. And in some of these ads, and because I've clicked on them, I keep getting more of them. I guess that's why I'm getting so many of them. Is they're products like big buckets full of 500 milligrams, 1,000 milligrams of Delta 8 THC, or even Delta 9. That this is scary. It's just really scary to me.
It is a scary issue, and it's also sort of a scary time for that. So again, thank you for your expertise. And so we've covered the legislative, we've covered the medical implications, but now we're really going to put a human face on this by hearing from an impacted parent. And again, I want to introduce Rita Warstall to tell her story.
So my name is Rita, and my son was Brian Fuller. He was 19 when he took his own life. My 16-year-old daughter, Breely, actually found him on our property. I knew that Brian had participated in or experimented smoking THC, but had no idea about intoxicating hemp products such as the Delta 8 and Delta 9s, which we had found in his room in abundance. He was ordering them online, and also he was getting them from the local gas station, which he should have not been able to do that. He was only 19. You're supposed to be legally 21, but that didn't matter. He was still purchasing them. I think that's why he was using that product, because it was so easy accessible to him. He was able to get it on his own. He didn't have to try to find someone to get it for him. It was easy for him to go online and order these products. And with Brian passing away the way that he done, they did a full extensive autopsy on him, also a full toxicology on him. And in his system, they found it actually lists the different forms of Delta that they found in his system, the Delta metabolites, and he had intoxication. So speaking with his pediatrician and his psychiatrist, they stated that they 100% believe that Brian had psychosis due to these toxins that he was taking in through the Delta products. And that contributed to him. He was hearing voices and kept talking about losing track of time and how he had unlocked his third eye, and just saying some pretty, he had actually wrote about it, saying these things and how he was feeling, and he was seeing things and how he was hearing things, and just a totally different behavior than what, Brian was ODD and ADHD. And I think that also contributed in the psychosis, because he did have ADHD, ADD, ODD. And I think that in being a young mind, then you put toxins on top of those disorders, then it is a foundation for something bad to happen.
Wow. So, how can parents be aware of some of the types of products? Because again, we've sort of talked about, where they can be located, but what do parents really have to look out for given the preponderance of these concerning products?
For me, it was the vapes, but I know, like we've discussed now, we've heard where they're coming out more with like the drinks, the edible products. Be vigilant, check their room, because what you may think is candy is not candy. That's a Delta product. Like, I've had a lot of youth, actually, I've spoke with parents that are like, we found these gummies and didn't know what they was until we heard your story, and then we checked more into it. They're getting them from the gas stations. They're not being regulated. It states that it should be that these kids should be 21. They're not. They're going to the gas station. I've been in line at a gas station here in Illinois and had a minor come in who was definitely a teenager between the ages, I'd say 13 to 15, purchasing these products, and they weren't carded. They were ID'd. It looks like candy. I spoke up and was even like, do you know what that is? And the kid kind of looked at me like he was irritated that I had brought it to their attention. They still sold it to him. They didn't stop it. They didn't say, hey, you're not of age, we need a CID. They went ahead and sold these products to that child. So, I mean, for parents to look for, it's even scarier now, so much more than what it was. I believe that the edibles were just starting, or maybe they'd been around when Brian had took his own life, but I think they're really more prevalent now. I think that's something that is enticing the youth to buy it, because it looks so inconspicuous to the parents also. So it would be something, I look at every package that I buy, whether it be for my kids, my grandkids, when I go into a gas station, because you hear of kids thinking they're buying candy, and it has these products in it. So just be vigilant on what your kids are purchasing, what you purchase for your kids, because you may not even know you're purchasing that product and it have that in it. So I'm very aware now. So I think I'm more aware than most, but that would be something that I would definitely be more leery of the edibles and the drinkables, because that's something, it's right there at the front of the checkout at most gas stations. So if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to buy it, just like the Delta vapes. They're next to regular vapes. So if you're somebody who vapes, you could buy one of those and not even realize you just purchased one unless you look at the packaging closely, because they look so similar to other products.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your story. That is just, again, the human face, sympathy, but really it's important that people hear these type of stories. So Rita, really want to thank you for sharing. So we're going to pop over now to the Q&A part of our webinar here. We're scheduled for another 15 minutes or so, but we want to make sure that we get to some questions here. And I'm going to sort of go in reverse order from what I'm seeing. So can someone take a slightly deeper dive? And maybe this would be a good one for you, Dr. Stout. Again, there still seems to be a little bit of confusion between hemp and cannabis. And then if you could also follow up why, again, these products are so dangerous to adolescents and their developing brains.
Okay, sure. The cannabis plant. So it's cannabis is the is the plant, and so there's cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, and then there's this cannabis ruralis. And the hemp plant, they're all in the same category. So hemp and cannabis can cross-pollinate. And so that's why you have to grow them separately, because a hemp plant can develop all kinds of THC just by interacting with another cannabis plant. So they're still in the same genus, and they just have different species, but though they're very, very similar. They do look a little different. So the leaves are different and you can tell the difference. It used to be a big deal to identify whether it was cannabis sativa or cannabis indica, but because of all this genetic modification and playing with the plants, they all are very, very similar now. So it's very difficult to have them isolated. And so that's why that happens. But it's the cannabinoids in the plant that we're concerned with. And like I said, there are small amounts of Delta 8 and Delta 9 in these plants, very small amounts, but they've been increased dramatically. And so the THC is the one we're the most concerned about. CBD is the non-intoxicating other very large component of this plant. And that is the one that has some health benefits that we think, or we don't know for sure yet, but there are researchers looking at that. And, that has no longer, it's not a schedule, CBD itself. And we have Epidiolex, which is a pharmaceutical grade of CBD. And so it's the THC that we're concerned about and all of the isomers. And so any language of a bill should actually say all potential isomers because they keep coming up with new isomers. But right now, those are the ones that we're concerned about because those are the ones that interact with the developing brain. And so we have, we have this endocannabinoid system in our brain. We never knew about it until all of this research came out about cannabis. So we didn't know about the endocannabinoid system until the 1990s, but it's a system that's our homeostatic system, our mood regulation system. It balances us and we create our own chemicals. And so we create chemicals. One is called anandamide, and that is to help us with our homeostatic system. THC can block the ability of our own natural system to work. And so when you're growing and during puberty, especially during adolescence, that is when the brain is charged with deciding what are these neurons that we're going to keep and strengthen and we're going to myelinate. What are the neurons we're going to prune because they're causing interference? And the CB1 receptors play a big role in that. And anandamide fits on a CB1 receptor, but also does delta 8, delta 9, and they interfere with that. And so then what happens is people don't get good development of their brain. And this can result in cognitive problems where people have smaller IQs. And then it goes on into adolescence. And there's research showing that there's increased risk of all kinds of psychiatric problems when people are using cannabis or delta 8, delta 10 during their development. So that's the increased risk of psychosis, the increased risk of suicide, the increased risk of violence. And suicide is basically violence toward yourself, and violence toward then other people can happen as well.
Thank you, Doc. And that sort of ties into the next question for Rita. What responsibility do you believe that lawmakers have now and to other families based on what happened to them? Again, we've been just so fortunate to have a champion like the office of Senator Mitch McConnell. But what can politicos, electeds, lawmakers do based on your experience? What would you like to see?
Well, I would like to see the intoxicating products through the hemp to just be gone. But I mean, just from listening, I'm educating myself more through just listening to others speak on it, is take responsibility. We know that it's a problem. And to fix the problem, we need to I feel like they try to regulate it by saying, you have to be 21 to buy the products, but that did no good. My family is suffering and still suffer today due to the passing of Brian. So to help other families, like they're talking about doing it at a percentage, the levels being at a certain percent. And I agree with what others have said, like CBD. I feel like being in the medical field, you see a lot of good properties in that and helping people, but help our youth, help other families from not having to go through, because it's not just my family. There's families all around that have went through the same thing that I went through, and it was supposedly regulated so it would prevent things like this from happening, and it hasn't. So, if we can get it to a point to where our youth, it's not available to the youth, that would be something I'd like to see.
Okay, and we've got also a couple of comments in the chat that I'm just going to read because it also is in context of what we were discussing about. So one of our attendees says they just want to make sure parents should also be looking for hide cans. And those are items that have hollow insides and make it easy for kids and youth to hide things they're not supposed to have. And this person says that they have seen them in hold on just a second. In just, all kinds of different formats where people have been able to hide things. And then there's another comment where someone saw a billboard in Louisville, Kentucky, advertising a website that sold cannabis products. They were specifically promoting a Delta 8. This person went to the website, and the website claimed that the only difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9 was that the Delta 8 did not have the paranoia associated with Delta 9 when coming down for a high. Otherwise, it had the same effects. So that's why it's so important that, in addition to the storytelling, that we're hearing more and more from medical professionals. And that's something that I always want to make sure gets hammered. Again, Colorado was the first state to legalize. There are a lot of questions, but more and more medical research from some of the top universities in our country are illustrating the risks. All right, I'll squeeze in one more here, and then we'll kick it back to Diane to kind of help wrap us up here. But another question, and this can be taken by anyone if we can keep it to a minute or so, because kids are able to order these products online with things like Visa gift cards, get it delivered by Uber, etc. What's going on in the prevention space, or what can be done to try to help mitigate that risk? Anyone who wants to take that one?
I think that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Being that, I mean, it is so accessible online. It doesn't make you show any identification. You click, yes, I'm 21. That's where the parents come in and intercept if they can. Be aware. I mean, that's a hard one to. I mean, Brian was ordering offline. He was 19. You know what I mean? So as a parent, the package never came in the mail to where I was like, well, what is that? You know what I mean? It didn't say Delta all over the package to where it'd be a red flag. So opening his mail would be, so I mean, that's a hard one. And I get where parents are, concerned about that.
Thank you again. All right, Diane, back to you. We want to sort of talk about some of the key takeaways and call to action. What can people do?
Yeah, and just to add to Rita's point, that's a big issue and that remains a big issue. But if we don't get this historical win implemented, it's almost like forget all these protections. I mean, these folks can go and sell their products in a state regulated market. That is where there have been regulations. Of course, they can be strengthened, but that's what's so dangerous about this. The intoxicating hemp loophole is just like a total free for all. You can sell these anywhere. You can say whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. And that is what is so deceptive about this. And that's where you all come in, because everybody on this call, it is amazing the work that everyone has done over the years. I mean, together, we were in meetings on Capitol Hill over and over again, showing products, families sharing their stories, educating, informing, like in schools and communities where people were just like, I don't know where this is coming from. We were contacting consumer brands and saying, hey, have you seen how your product's being mimicked in these products and sold at gas stations? And it all accumulated with the leadership of attorney generals across the country, Republican and Democrats, saying this is a public health crisis. So to the point of where do we go from here? This was a huge win that we cannot be complacent about. And this year is crucial. If this gets implemented federally, this will be huge. I mean, states are already looking at how they conform to this, what they have to do. You've got California saying, I mean, they did this even before this, but if it's psychoactive, it's in the legal market and everything else is illegal. So you've got states responding, and this is our chance. And we cannot stay by the sidelines. Oh, I apologize. We just cannot stay by the sidelines. And so just to ask, if there is a delay or there is a weakening, we just extend the access of these products to our kids and the harms. Because right now, they haven't been stopped either. It hasn't, they're not illegal federally right now. So the point of, what is that going to take? While we don't have the financial power, we've shown that we can have the influence, that if we stand together and with collective effort, we can keep this win. I mean, this is profound. And so if we stand together and we oppose any of these efforts to weaken or delay the law, and this is what we would ask if anybody would like to continue to be involved. And I know a lot of people on the call have just done tremendous amount of work. We're going to be following up with an email. We'll have a petition. We would love if you could sign it, if you could share it with others. And then there's going to be a place to more specifically, add what you would like to specifically be involved in this year. But this year is going to be critical. And we just want to thank Morgan, and we want to thank all of our remarkable speakers and all the information they shared. And for everyone on all the call, that This is something we can do. I know these products can feel overwhelming, but this is what we can do to protect kids and families and our communities. And Rita, thank you so much for sharing your story. That's just heart-wrenching. It's unacceptable that we're allowing this to happen to so many families. So thanks again to everybody, and thank you, Alton.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending. So just two more quick things. We want to point people towards a website, thcphotos.org, that really illustrates the numerous forms that these products that we're so concerned about are, what they look like. And so you'll be able to see all kinds of different products, but there's also a button where you can click and specifically see the intoxicating hemp products and all the different forms that they come in. And they were also looking to continue to build these types of partnerships. So if anyone's interested in really joining up with us, you can get in touch with Julie Dryfault at julie@onechancetogrowup.org. And with that, again, we want to thank you for your time, your interest in this, and please, again, attendees, keep an eye out for a follow-up email that will contain even more information.
Thank you, everybody.